Welcome to the podcast that is completely dedicated to reconnecting children, families, and the entire human species with the wonders of nature. So open your door, step on outside, and prepare for adventure. This is Nature Kids Radio.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me out forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. Just turn me loose, let me straddle.
Hello and welcome back to Nature Kids Radio. I'm Kenny Ballantyne, filmmaker, speaker, and founder of the Nature Kids Institute. Today we are going to go wild. I've always had a wild side, and I bet that somewhere deep inside, you have a wild side too. I love a good adventure. But when my wife and I had our first child, I put my wild side away. After all, that was the responsible thing to do, right? When you have little kids, it's not the time for high adventure. At least, that's what I thought. Until one day when I was at a Boy Scout shop and a paperback book caught my eye. It was called Kids in the Wild, and on the cover was a picture of a mom and dad on a high-altitude backpacking trip, with a 1-year-old in a backpack carrier and a 3-year-old riding a llama. I had to know what this book was all about. Now, the book turned out to be a guide on how to go on outdoor adventures with young children, and it played a central role in transforming my family and inspiring me to make the Nature Kids film. Just a few months after discovering her book, I found myself on a family camping trip in Joshua Tree National Park with world traveler Cindy Ross and her son Bryce. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship with one of the most inspiring people I have ever met.
My name is Cindy Ross, and I am a travel writer and author. I have published 6 books on long-distance walking, the National Scenic Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. The last trail, my husband and I, Todd Gladfelter, took our children across over the course of 5 summers, covering about 500 miles each summer from Canada to Mexico. They started when they were 1 and 3 years old, and we had about 100 cloth diapers with us, and we were hiking the Colorado Trail. We had one llama that carried my daughter Sierra, and then the rest of the llamas were stock animals. Bryce was still too little to ride a llama. He was only 1.5 at that point. And we thought that we would probably not do any more than just the 500-mile Colorado Trail. My husband Todd and I were long-distance hikers all our lives since we were in our late teens, early 20s. And so we wanted to try to continue this love of the outdoors and long-distance walking. So when we had children, we didn't want to stop and didn't think that we would be able to keep hiking until we met someone at a party actually here in Pennsylvania who overheard me complaining that we couldn't backpack anymore. And he told us that with stock animals like llamas, we could continue to hike. And so it was never our plan to hike 3,100 miles with our little kids, but that's what our dream became and took 5 summers to complete. The last part we was through the state of New Mexico, which is a lot of desert, and water sources were 40 miles apart. So we couldn't carry water for the llamas and ourselves. So we traded out our llamas and got tandem mountain bikes and pulled trailers through New Mexico for 650 miles on the Great Divide mountain bike trail. And so we finished when the kids were about 6 and 8, and realized that, well, actually, I guess we realized along the way what it was doing to our children and how it was impacting them positively, spending all their formative years of their lives, their summers living in the wilderness and crossing the Rocky Mountain Range. And it kind of made us realize the kind of impact that we could have on them as far as learning and growing healthfully by spending a lot of time in the outdoors. And so we spent the rest of their childhood continuing on that venue and doing lots of long distance cycling and paddling and things like that all the years they were growing up. So we began what was just my husband Todd and I's love of the outdoors and long distance hiking, and just wanted to take our kids along because we didn't want to stay home. But then we realized the tremendous gifts that occurred when you take your kids out into nature, and especially if you can stay out there for a while and live in the wilderness.
Upon hearing Cindy's story, a lot of people are just, well, shocked. I believe that at some level, it's the kind of authentic experience we all want to have with our kids while they're young. But many of us, my former self included, don't really believe it's possible or even safe.
Well, I think if they were honest, what is holding them back is themselves and the amount of work that they might think it entails, and or risk as far as their children's safety. But in reality, it's not true at all. And I've heard parents say that they were going to wait until their kids are older, and the only thing that happens when you wait is you ruin your chances of having them fall in love with living in the outdoors and traveling in it, because they don't grow up, they're not used to it. So to remove creature comforts from, like, say, a preteen-year-old or something like that who has an opinion at that point and hasn't grown up with it, is like, it's hard to convince older kids that this is fun, or this is fun with mom and dad. So I think it's important to start as soon as they're born. And I mean, we took Sierra on a month and a half trip around the desert Southwest when she was only 5 months old, and walked down into the Grand Canyon backpacking with her. And we've done that to both of our children, and they grew up in a child carrier, and they grew up in a canoe, and they grew up in a kid trailer that we pulled on our bikes. And and parents might think it's more work, but it's not really more work at all, because kids are happy out there and they completely adapt. I mean, when we were on the Continental Divide over the course of over 3,000 miles, we had some pretty crappy weather, which made adults miserable and unhappy and uncomfortable. But as long as we took care of our kids' needs, it didn't matter. They just saw everything as exciting and fun. So it's not really inconvenient and difficult for kids to be out there when it's young. I think it's more on the parents that they think it's too much work. But really, when it comes down to it, is the fun that the kids have, the lack of fighting and conflict that it just doesn't happen when they're outdoors. Usually, makes it easier to bring kids in the outdoors and in nature, more so than being in the confines of your home.
I've experienced this as well with my own kids and other children I've worked with. I've seen aggression, bad attitudes, defiance, depression, and the symptoms of ADD just melt away when kids are outside. And so I asked Cindy, why does this happen?
I don't know. I wondered that myself when I was raising my kids when they were really little, because you know how when we were growing up, we spent so much time outdoors, and even my husband, when he's grouchy and disagreeable, I just say, go outside and go do some kind of work outside. And he always gets happy. And so we shoot our kids out when they were inside for whatever reason, and they were starting to pick at each other. And as soon as they got outside, I don't know, I think it's like this common ground and this soothing ability of nature, but there's space to begin with. So no one's at each other's neck because you're in a confined space. And I think that's part of it, is just being, too close to this person and needing to have some freedom and space. And so whatever's happening, as soon as they go outside, they calm down. And I think it's nature that calms them down, but it's also the fact that they have their freedom and their space to move about the way they want to. And I think a lot of children's frustrations as they're growing up is because they can't do what they want to do. There's so many rules and regulations for kids, and there's not that many when you're outside in nature. As long as a parent isn't like, oh, don't do this and don't do that. It's, you can wander where you want. You can go play in a creek. You can do whatever you want. And I think that just really appeals to young children growing up, this whole sense of freedom that being out in nature gives them that they don't get when they're in the house. There's a lot more rules at a house than there are outside.
Now, not everybody describes themselves as the high adventure type, and that's okay. I've always advocated for people to find their own unique place on what I call the nature connection spectrum. You see, there's a huge, diverse spectrum of ways people can connect with nature. On one end of that spectrum, we have the simple, everyday interactions with nature, such as smelling the flowers, watching clouds, or caring for a plant. On the opposite end of the spectrum are the more wild or even adventurous nature connections, like mountain climbing or long-distance hiking. And in between these two extremes, there are millions of interactions that people can experience, and each one is equally valid. To me, it's not so important exactly how you are connecting with nature, but rather that you are connecting with nature. Now, that being said, I believe Cindy makes a convincing argument in favor of pursuing some high adventure activity with kids and as a family.
I was talking to some students at a university, and I was asking them why they get piercings all over their face and tattoos everywhere. And I was just curious about this. And quite a few of them said, well, when I get pierced, when I get tattoos, it's an adrenaline rush. And I like that, and it's addictive. And so I want to get more and more and more because I like that feeling. And the one girl who had a tongue bar was telling me that she wants a tongue bar because she gets bored and that's what she plays with during the day. And I sat there and I thought, wow, okay, my kids are pretty young then. And I thought, I want to try to, model and show them a lifestyle where they can find adventure and excitement in a positive way that will broaden them and educate them and make them happy and help them figure out who they are and what they want to do and contribute to the world. And I just thought it was so sad to think of an 18-year-old who can't think of a way to find excitement beyond getting her body pierced. And when I had my kids down in Florida, we went down for a month, and we were paddling all kinds of rivers and mountain biking and hiking on the Florida Trail. And we made this big circle around Orlando, and the kids kept seeing signs pointing to Disneyland and would tell me that, oh, they have friends at school that have been there 5 times, and aren't we going? And it's like, nope. That's simulated adventure. I'm taking you on the Okefenokee Swamp and the Swanee River, where we saw 60 alligators a day. And that kind of experience in life, impacted them. So, so much more growing in knowledge and personal growth is going to happen when they're out there for an extended time doing something epic where they have these life-changing memories that they can draw on their whole lives. And then that just sets the bar so that when they get older, they don't see limits. I mean, what you learn on an adventure that's longer in the outdoors, in the wilderness, teaches you so many things about your choices in your life and how you spend your time and the life that you create. And so their bar is set higher as far as wanting to have higher challenges and pushing themselves and not seeing limits and things like that. That's what long distance adventures in the outdoors teaches your children, and those kinds of lessons, I don't know where they can learn them. I mean, sports and things like that are good, and you learn things from being a team player and things like that. But as far as like having like a wilderness experience, I mean, when we took our kids down the Okefenokee Swamp and the Swanee River for a week when they were little, and we did see 60 alligators a day, and we slept on these wooden chickies out in the wilderness where there's, big bull alligators that are laying next to you bellowing because they want to come up on their pad and sunbathe, and that's where your tent is. This is like life changing stuff for children, and it does teach them so many lessons about limits and challenges and a quality of life that they come to expect and want. So they're not happy with a mediocre life where they're just kind of coasting and rolling and, like, just letting whatever happens. What happens is children develop into these adults who want to do more and aren't happy and aren't satisfied with mediocrity, and so they try harder to be a better person, to make an impact, to make a difference. And I think it all stems from can stem from these kinds of wilderness outdoor adventures that parents can bring their kids on. So I mean, it's so multi-layered and so big, much bigger than, oh, you have a great memory of a paddling trip for a week. No, there's really big stuff happening underneath to your children as they're growing up and experiencing stuff like this. They're learning about things like fear. Like, do I need to be afraid of a 16-foot alligator or seeing 60 a day? No, alligators aren't going to jump in my canoe and eat me. So then you learn there's things you don't need to be afraid of. There's things you need to be cautious about. So then you can look at other things in life, like, I don't need to be afraid of this. I can stick my neck out and try something. So these kids, even though they're not conscious of it, they're learning these lessons and they're making choices when they're young that's going to impact their whole lives. And it's all positive, but you can't tell. I mean, now that my kids are 22 and 24, I see the results of how we raised them and what we did. And it's just tremendously positive what has occurred because of that. But while it was happening, we just wanted to have a good time and make a big memory with our family, but there's so much more that's happening out there.
Cindy's adventures inspire me. They make me want to pack up my kids, head out into the wild, and do something that will frighten my parents. And believe me, I have. If you're not feeling as inspired as I am, that's perfectly okay. Alligators, thunderstorms, and thousands of miles can all sound a bit intimidating. But you have to remember that Cindy and her husband Todd have lots of experience doing this sort of stuff. And there is more than one way to have an adventure.
Well, there's all kinds of levels in between what we do and what we have done and doing nothing. And I would never tell anyone to pack up their babies and take them across the Rockies when they don't have experience like we had. But, there's small steps that you can take then, and everything builds knowledge and confidence so that you can go out and stay a little longer and find out. Like, for instance, like when we first started bicycle riding with Sierra, when she was 1 year old, we did the C&O Canal, which is 185 miles from Cumberland, Maryland to Washington, D.C. Well, we found out that, okay, we don't have to go on any streets. Every 5 miles, there's a water pump and a picnic table and a campground and a clean river to swim in. So we can do this with our little kid and pull her in a trailer. And so we chose adventures that didn't require us to stick our neck out. And if something happened and we had to bail, we could get on a train and get back to our car in an hour. So you can do things that are certainly within your ability, that are smaller until you gain confidence. But you don't have to go into the wild, rough wilderness to have an experience like this. You can go on a bike trail like the C&O Canal with your kids and have a lot of the same kind of things occur and build some knowledge base so that you can go a little further. But there's lots of places that you can have adventures and still be safe and be rescued and have an easier learning curve in case you do screw up. So I would just say really start small and stay at state parks and county parks and camp like that, and different things. Or if you want to start backpacking, you walk in for half a day and set up a base camp and then do day hikes from there and then walk out to your car. Just take small steps until you're comfortable and you learn the sport, and can figure out if something does go wrong what to do. Parents have to educate themselves, it's true, but there's anything wrong with getting to a certain age in life and learning new things too. I mean, that's what happens to so many adults, is they just get comfortable doing what they do. And to think about taking your kids on some kind of outdoor nature wilderness experience just sounds like, whoa, that's just too much for me to like learn. But that's the reason we have our children too, is to keep us young and to learn new things, and that means we're learning along with them too. So what might appear to be uncomfortable or too much work, really just broadens us as adults and makes us learn too. And we certainly, doesn't matter how old we are, we have more that we can learn, and we should be learning right alongside our kids.
So, one of the things I like to talk about with parents and educators are the benefits of risk, or what we call beneficial risk. This suggests that it is actually very healthy and beneficial for kids to experience conditions where they can scrape a knee or even get lost or break a bone. In this world, it is easy to raise bubble-wrapped or overprotected kids, which can have frightening consequences in itself. So, is risk something to be avoided or embraced?
When we first decided to take our kids across the Colorado Trail when they were 1 and 3, I was pretty freaked in the beginning, thinking about my kid dying out there, the 1-year-old. And people told me that he could die, and I figured, yeah, he could die. Any of us could die at any time. So I was like trying to think about this, and if I was being irresponsible bringing this child out there. Some people said, maybe you ought to put like a tether on him. And I thought, wow, that's really going to crimp his style in the wilderness, having a tether on him or some kind of harness. And then, we were out there like 10 minutes, and I realized this child is not going to go run off a cliff. He's not going to do that. I mean, he put glass in his mouth that he found in a campfire, and he got all covered with soot, and he would, and it would be like, take the glass out of your mouth kind of a thing. But I tried really hard not to get too excited over things that they did, because I realized pretty quickly that they're not going to be that stupid, no matter even if they're 1, to do things that are dumb. And they might not know that you don't swallow. I don't know. It just, the risk just never. I mean, we were there for 3,100 miles. We never needed a Band-Aid. So, and it wasn't like my kids didn't climb on crap and do things like that. I mean, Bryce, he was way up in some chimney climbing up, a rock face when we were in camp, and my friend had to go, get him down because he couldn't come down. He could only go up. And that happens a lot, and anybody could get hurt out there. But I tried not to ever think about that or go there, and just, we watched them, of course. But as far as like risk and danger, I don't know. I think it can happen in the backyard. It's just like Lyme's disease. Do we stay out of the woods? Well, you can get it in the yard, in a little tiny yard. So do we stay indoors all the time? Do we live in a little closet hoping that we're going to stay safe? But all kinds of things can happen to you. So I don't really see it as risky out there. I think it's risky to decide not to live because you're afraid. To me, that seems like death and risk. And so many people are completely controlled by fear and what they're afraid of in life, and so it limits them from living this wonderful rich life because they're afraid to take any chances. And so they often don't live the actualized life that they were, here to do, and don't accomplish great things because they're afraid. And figuring out that you're not going to die in a lightning storm, or is important for even a child to learn, but even adults. So every time you are in a situation where it could be a little risky and you figure it out and you're okay, that builds on your confidence that I can do the next thing, or I can start my own business. It doesn't matter. Confidence is confidence. I mean, and if you get it from living through a thunder lightning storm on a ridge, it gives you a little bit more leverage to believe that you can, live all the other ways that you want to live in your life too. And I think that's lacking in a lot of people. And I think that if we bring our children up differently so that we do expose them to risks out in nature, then we can raise more confident people to fulfill their dreams and live the life that they were supposed to be living.
Now, if there is an example of what it looks like to grow up in today's world without nature deficit disorder, it is Sierra and Bryce, Cindy and Todd's kids, who are now adults. They survived their very alternative upbringing. I know these two personally, and if my kids turn out half as well as they have, I will be very pleased. These are two of the most creative, focused, and present young adults I have ever met, and I have to conclude that their high dose of nature time had something to do with it. So I had to ask Cindy, how does free time in nature affect a growing child?
Well, I think one of the things that happens, and Richard Louv talked about this, is all this free time in nature, stimulates your senses, and it turns you into this really creative person. And it doesn't matter if you want to be an engineer or you want to be, a fine artist. It just feeds that part of your mind, the creative part. And it's very interesting, Kenny. I think Daniel Pink wrote this book, Brave New Mind, or I think that's the name of it. But he was saying that where everybody was looking for people who had their masters in business, now they want them in masters of fine arts. And it didn't matter what kind of corporation or what they made. They wanted to hire people like that because they were taught to think creatively, and everything in every business is problem solving and trying to figure out how to make more money or how to make a better product or whatever, and artists are trained that way. And that's one of the things that happens when you spend a lot of time with nature is your whole creativity level just goes off the charts as far as feeding that part of your mind and your heart and your soul. And so that's what happened to my children, and that's what happens to almost everyone who spends a ton of time out there. And that impacts the world on a level that everyone in society can agree on is necessary. So becoming a creative person, you wouldn't think that you could equate it to spending time out in nature, but that's one of the biggest things that happens, is that whole part of your brain is developed differently than when you're indoors and you're being entertained and fed information from other sources instead of them coming into all of your senses at one time. So I've seen that that's one of the biggest differences in my children and a lot of other people their age because of that. And the thing is, if you can creatively look at your life and solve your problems and figure things out, it seems like it makes you a happier person anyway. So that's all good. All parents want their kids to be happy. Some parents want their kids to be wealthy and, comfortable monetarily, but I've never raised my kids to think that's that important. Todd and I being long distance hikers and having so much free time and independence to do what we wanted. And as artists, we wanted our children to value their independence and their freedom to do the kind of work and live the kind of life they wanted to, more importantly than striving for money, which to us never really looked like happiness. So I think the creativity part is just crazy big as far as what happens to kids when they're out there, as opposed to kids that are really connected to technology and spend most of their time doing that. And like I said, it isn't just that we want all our kids to be writers and artists and things like that, but we do want them to be able to think creatively, because everything in their lives, whether it's how to figure out their life, how to figure out their job, how to figure out relationships, you really do excel better in life if you can look at it from a creative point of view and problem solve like that. So everybody needs those skills. Doesn't matter who they are or what occupation they're in. So that's going to help everybody by spending more time like that outdoors. They learned how to cross rivers and deal with storms and get warm when they were cold, and they learned that they don't need a lot of material things to be happy, and they learned how to get along with each other when no one else is around but just their sibling, and they learned how to wonder and dream and think and make up stories because they never had a TV there to stimulate them. So they learn how to be happy with little, and they learn how little you do need to be happy.
To me, this is the biggest takeaway from Cindy's story. You really can have it all. This beautiful planet we call home, and loving people to share it with. And that's enough. Or at least it can be, if we have the courage to live just a little differently. If we can look at the limitations and boundaries that hold us back and say, "You're not going to stop me. There's a big, beautiful world out there, and I'm going to get out there and play in it."
You shouldn't see limits to anything. If you want to do something, or you want to raise your kid a certain way, or you want to try to change how you're raising them or how you're spending your time, that something might look like a barrier or barricade to stop you, but you just might have to be a little bit more believing in yourself and what you think is important for your child as far as raising them. Like when we were put our kids in school, we had to go to the administrator, and they had 5 days that they were allowed for field trips, and that was it. Well, we used to go and travel every year for the whole month of September. So they missed their first 5 days and the first month of every school year. And I went in there and I said, look, this is really important to us. We are learning, my kids are learning so much about the world and people that I need to be able to do this. Of course, I was a travel writer, and I wrote about family travel, so I needed my family with us. But that administration, they had never dealt with this issue before, but they were willing to work with us. My kids, they missed 75 days of school, and they were at the top of their whole entire school district. So it didn't impact them negatively. It just made them bright children who loved learning. So, you don't have to be a homeschool kid, but you could still work within the parameters of your school system if this is what you think is important and good for your kids. So the reason I'm citing this is that, what looks like a limit, you just have to believe that you have a better way that you want your children to learn and how to raise them and what you think is best. And you might just have to work for it, that's all, but I think it's worth it. But don't see limits in anything, as far as if you believe this is going to help your child and make them a happier, more well-rounded adult as they grow up.
You can keep up with Cindy over at CindyRossTraveler.com, and you really should check out her books. They are all fantastic. My 2 personal favorites are Kids in the Wild, which is a guidebook for high adventure with families, and Scraping Heaven, which tells the story of their epic family Continental Divide trek. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, please help out the podcast by going over to iTunes, by writing a review, and by giving us a 5-star rating. And if you would like more information on how to connect kids with nature every day,
head on over to naturekidsinstitute.com, where you can join our mailing list and also sign up for a free webinar. Until then, I'm Kenny Ballantyne, and I will see you outside.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me out forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. Just turn me loose, let me straddle